that. My name is Graham McLaughlin with the St. Catharines Enterprise Center, and in partnership with the Niagara Falls Enterprise Center and the Niagara region, we're bringing you part one of Resiliency Rock Stars today. I will turn it over to Neil Cosby, who will lead the introductions of the team doing the presentation. Neil?
Thank you, Graham. And it's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues to present this very important topic that is front and center as we continue navigating this pandemic. And, we know that we're in for the long haul now. This is not going to be a quick fix. So it's going to be even more important to pay attention to this if you are an employer and you have employees. So the title of our presentation today is Mental Health at Work. How are employees coping, and are you ready for what's next? Hilda, if I can get you to go to the next slide. Our team is made up of Aviva Abraham. Aviva is a seasoned group benefits consultant. So she acts on behalf of employers to find the best customized benefits package for their service, for their needs. Myself, Neil Cosby, I will handle the compliance and legislative pieces of your employer obligations to keep people psychologically safe at work, different pieces of legislation, as well as what that entails in terms of being able to provide to your employees. Hilda Gan is the president of People Bright Consulting, and I think I didn't mention Aviva's company is CPMG, mine is HR Primed. Hilda is the president of People Bright Consulting. Hilda is many things, and one of the piece that she will cover today is management development. So supporting managers as they try to support their employees through these next turbulent months. And finally, Julie Holden. Julie is the president of Holden and Associates. She has been a disability consultant for a number of years, helping clients navigate short-term disability, long-term disability, WSIB, and a number of other benefit or disability pieces. So that is our team. Hilda and Julie are front and center to be presenting today. Both of them have presented extensively on this topic in an introductory capacity as well as an ongoing educational piece so that employers, organizations can ensure they are keeping their workplaces mentally sound. A little bit of history here. I don't want to take too much time, just cognizant that we only have a little bit of time to present. We recognize the need for something like this even before COVID. There has always been a need to make employers aware about mental health and workplace wellness. Obviously, with COVID-19, this has been exacerbated. These are, and I hate to use a cliche, but it's so true, unprecedented times. And the weight on everybody's shoulders is very cumbersome. And the big thing I believe that is the biggest piece of this is the uncertainty as we move forward. So it's important that employers become aware of what's out there, what people could be dealing with, what they can do to support them. It's a very important piece to note that what you do for your employees during these turbulent times will be remembered long after this is over. And that's another important piece to it. So we have a very multifaceted approach, as you can see. We want to talk about mental health overall, bring it into the COVID realm, where it is possibly going in terms of with things like Christmas coming up, and then talk about some of the legislative pieces and what you can do to support your employees vis-a-vis group benefits and management training. So I'm gonna turn it over to my two colleagues whose pictures are much better than mine in this. I'd like to introduce you to Hilda Gan and Julie Holden. And I am so glad that you have joined us for this very informative and stellar presentation.
Thanks,
Over
Neil.
to you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing this, and thanks for the people who are joining us today and taking time to learn more about some of the things we're going to talk about today. So I wanted to share with you the highlights of what we are going to talk about when we talk about mental health awareness and the role of the employee and the company. So today is part one, and as Neil says, we're hoping that you'll join us for part two. Today's focus will be on really understanding and talking about the mental health aspect of COVID and the impact that that's having on us as employees, us as companies and organizations. What we'll do is give you some stats to help you understand the situation in respect to mental illness, the impact that that's having on COVID-19 in the workplace. And when Julie's going to talk about the stigma of mental health, which is still around, and get into that with a little bit more detail. And then we really want to help you focus on what can employees do to foster a mental health wellness workplace? And then what can employers do to help foster a mental wellness place? And then I will talk about the role of leaders and managers and the new challenges as a result of COVID-19 that you haven't quite had an opportunity to think about or get into learning how to do better. So we'll do a Q&A session. If you've got questions, we encourage you to put that in the Q&A section. If you've got ideas that you want to share with people, because you've got things that are working, please use the chat box and share it and address it to all attendees, all panelists and attendees. So I want to kind of take us back to March 2020, when in Ontario, the government declared that it was a state of emergency and businesses were being locked down and only essential services were going to happen. Schools were being extended by 2 weeks for their break, but then that ended up being obviously much longer. By the time we rolled into May and June, businesses that were the non-essential services were now being allowed to reopen. And online learning was announced that it would just continue for the rest of the year. Then highlight over to August and September, and what was happening now was people were getting ready for school, and school was going to be online or in class, and it was optional, and that still is the case. What we found too happening was more targeted approaches on the statistics and location. So rather than province-wide, we were going to have this kind of shutdown or this kind of restriction, the government started looking at the stats. The different jurisdictions looked at the stats and said, we are in a code red situation, or we're in orange, or whatever. So we started having that. There was big concerns of people coming back to school and the concern about the big wave. And so on September 28th, the second wave was declared. So now we're in November, and outbreaks have escalated, and the serious concerns, the numbers talking about 6,500 cases happening. So these are alarming statistics if the mapping out by the statisticians proves to be true. And as a result, I think we're all in this period of uncertainty. We're back to social distancing being restricted and tightened. And this is a stress. This is a stress on businesses. This is a stress on employees. This is a stress on families. And it's been going on long term. So it's not a 2-week episode anymore. It is now, depending on where you are, 7, 8, 9 months. So how can businesses survive? And what is the toll on employees, employers, and the families? And I think this is what Julia and I really want to dive into with you. Besides COVID-19, though, there are other things that have been coming to play. The election what has come and gone in the US, but it still ain't over, according to at least one person and his party. And I don't want to be too political about it, but there is tension still. There's the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter, the ongoing saga of the classroom and what's that's happening. And this introduction of more attention to diversity, inclusiveness. All of these things are creating what I'll call this very long-term stress. And don't get me wrong, stress is healthy. You know, Hans Selye said the definition of no stress, because we wish we could have no stress, the definition of no stress is eustress, and it's death. That is the definition of no stress. So we'll always have stress. It's just the degree of it. So I love this dashboard that kind of talks about where are you at gauging your stress level. And I do that. I mentally try to stay within what I'll call optimum to moderate stress. But because of all these factors we've just talked about, this is turning the dial up. And for some people, they get beyond moderate stress. They get into excessive stress or burnout. And this is what we want to talk about today, is to prevent that excessive stress in employees and have employees and businesses really try to create an organization and individuals in that optimum to moderate stress zone. So I'm going to ask Julie now to take over and talk about, first of all, statistics.
Thanks, Hilda, and welcome everyone. So yeah, let's talk about some of the numbers out there. And these were pre-COVID, by the way, at least the first few. So 1 in 5 Canadians experience a mental illness in any given year. And actually 1 in 3 experience a mental challenge or illness in their lifetime. So again, this is pre-COVID. And as we know, this is affecting just about everyone. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide now. It had been projected that it would be in 2020, back several years. So here we are in 2020, and sure enough, if it wasn't, on track to be before, it certainly is. So a lot of folks are suffering with depression these days. This one always shocks me. Over 500,000 Canadians miss work in any given week due to mental illness and problems or challenges. That's an awful lot of folks across the country. I work a lot in disability as well as workplace mental health, and 1 in 3 disability claims are mental health related. So, and even if someone started out with a physical illness, like someone would have a cardiac event or something like that, they often will have a secondary depression that follows it. So, there's a lot of there's a real connection there between the physical and the mental. Burnout is classified, and this is classified by the World Health Organization. It was a couple years back, they recognized it as a real thing. A lot of people would talk about, oh, I'm burnt out, I feel burnt out, but no one really was recognizing it. It is now, and it is as a result of the workplace. So chronic stress in the workplace, as you see there. So now we're talking more about COVID, and 42% of Ontario adults have increased their substance abuse or gambling during this time. So that's very worrisome. That's extremely high. And 81 of Canadian workers report mental health has been impacted as a result of COVID-19. So again, and those are the ones that are reporting it. And I suspect it may even be higher because not everyone does report these things. So we're looking at a problem that existed pre-COVID, and it's now gotten worse. So stigma is in fact discrimination, and fortunately, there have been a lot of athletes, like we've got Silken Lohman, the Olympic rower, and a lot of other athletes and musicians and famous folks coming forward, which is really great to talk about their issues around mental illness. There's still a lot more work to be done though. And it unfortunately, it causes people not to seek the help they need because they don't want people to know, so it's a serious thing, and there's still a lot of work to be done. We've got up there, it's invisible, you can't see it. So if you can put a smile on your face and look like you are okay, then people don't know that you're suffering. We also have inner, so there's self-discrimination, which actually is just as serious as external. So the difference is, that little voice in our head that sometimes is saying things to us that are quite negative, we're not good enough, or we didn't do a good job, or we're a failure. I heard someone say that to me the other day because she's suffering with her mental health. She says she's a failure. She's not a failure at all. But this is the discrimination around stigma. And the external is just what other people, they may stigmatize people. So yeah, 48% are reluctant to disclose to a boss or coworker that they are suffering with mental health issues. And also we have to look at other sources of stigma, like, you know, the government funding. It's not at parity with physical diseases and things like that, research and scientific endeavors into physical illnesses. Mental health has always taken a back seat. And there's always announcements, like I saw something, I think it was yesterday, there was an announcement that there's more funding now for mental health, but it's still quite below physical health. So there's different types of stigma at play, and there's a lot of work to be done. So let's talk about how can you identify it. So if you or someone you work with or someone on your team has excessive stress or burnout, what does it look like? So we have this this person here that's, you know, unfortunately not doing well, and sorry. Just had a little interruption there. So this person isn't doing well, as you can see, is feeling burnt out. And so what does it look like? So in yourself, you know, you may be feeling like you don't want to go to work. You don't want, you're not sleeping well. Maybe you are, you know, having a little more to drink or other substances, things like that. You can't concentrate, you can't focus, and you don't feel well. You don't feel like yourself. You may have heard that saying, "I'm not myself today." And that's a well-known saying for someone that wants to say, "I'm just not myself today." And that's okay. So when we look at one of your coworkers, a colleague, or someone on your team, it shows up in very different ways. And it could be, you know, there's a lot of errors in the work now. Work is late or doesn't come in. It's sloppy. Someone that had been doing a good job before is just not. They're not showing up for meetings, things like that, all sorts of things. Having a very negative attitude and getting into conflicts with people is another big sign. So there's quite a few there. I'm not going to go through them all, but it's that type of thing, you know, a change in behavior. And the good news is there are tools and resources out there. We're going to talk a little bit about that a little later on, but there are ways to assess ourselves. And as Hilda said a few minutes ago, we need to check in with ourselves and see how we're doing. And of course, check in with other people. So we will talk about some tools in just a little bit. So what does a healthy workplace look like compared to an unhealthy workplace? If actually, I'll ask if anyone wants to throw up some words in the chat just for a couple of seconds. We can see, you know, maybe some of the things that you're thinking of, starting with maybe a healthy workplace. Like what does that look like to you? Or what do you think that would look like?
So
And
I'd
I'll,
encourage people to put something in the chat box and make sure that it is to everybody, attendees and panelists, so we can all share in your knowledge and experience.
absolutely. Thanks, Hilda. So I'm seeing a few things come in. Maybe Neil, you can read them out for us.
Unmute myself. Respectful, open communication, collaborative, no abuse, collegial.
Yeah, that's great. Those are all really good. Thank you. It's so I work with, you know, employers, as Hilda does, on workplace mental health, and so one of the tools that I use is the Psychological Health and Safety Standard, which you may have heard of. And so according to them, it's some of these things, which you've identified some. So it's recognition. Are we recognizing people, you know, for good work that they're doing? It's so important to do that. Are they being transparent? And someone did say that. You know, is there transparent communication, or are things, you know, kept tight and hidden, that kind of thing? Do people have the right tools to do their job? I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. And role clarity. Role clarity is a big one. Sometimes, you know, someone's hired in to do a job, and you know, you think this is your role and this is your job and everything, and then it really evolves into something totally different, and that does happen to people. It's like, well, what's my job? I'm so confused. What do you want me to do? You know, type thing. So those are some of the things, along with some of the things that you put there, which I think I saw a couple more pop up. Bullying, I think, yeah, you'd see that in an unhealthy one. So let's move over to an unhealthy one. I did see that, so that's a good one. we're going to see, I'll just go over those quickly. So you're going to see an environment where there's fear and anxiety, you know, no communication or very little communication. You're going to see a lot of conflicts in the workplace. You're also going to see in the work, you know, a lot of missed opportunities and work being late and that kind of thing. So all sorts of conflicts, fear and anxiety and that kind of thing. And you don't want to see that in the workplace. So those are signs of an unhealthy one. Okay, thanks, Hilda.
Good. Oops. Yep.
So what can employees do? So we'll just go back for a sec.
Did we fast forward too far? Sorry about that there.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at what employees can do. So because it is a two-way street, so there's you know, an onus on the employee to take care of our own health and take care of ourselves, and there's an onus on the employer to you know, have a healthy workplace and culture and, you know, foster people's mental health. So let's take a look first at what employees can do. And of course, Hilda does a lot of work in this area. And so we'll both talk about this as we move forward, this one and the other one. So here are some things, again, from, you know, experience and the, again, aligned with the Psychological Health and Safety Standard, which helps employers put in a framework to have a healthy workplace. Some of these, you know, you would have seen a lot of before, like who hasn't seen include physical activity as part of your healthy lifestyle and eating healthy. I mean, we all know we're supposed to do those things, but I think sometimes we don't connect those things with mental health, and they are absolutely connected. And there's a lot of science behind all of that, even eating healthy. Meditating and mindfulness, we've got some neat apps and resources we'll tell you about a little later on. I've started doing a little bit of that myself. How about you, Hilda? Do you do any of these things? What do you do?
I really, you know, mindfulness was such a buzzword for so many years. And I remember attending a session and it really resonated with me that we need to spend more time not thinking about what we need to do next, but just enjoying and being present in the moment. So I'm really a strong proponent now of mindfulness.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to take a long time. Like it's just really being in the moment. Some of these are, I mean, they're all really important. I mean, we've all heard of, you know, balancing work and life. Some people are talking about it more in terms of integrating work and life, because it's so hard to balance it some days. And it's just, okay, I'm going to do this for my home life right now. And then I'm going to, you know, take care of that for work. And it's just sort of integrated into your day. But you can do it in different ways, whatever works for you, as long as one doesn't get, you know, too much focus, especially the work part, which is unhealthy.
Yeah, and I find it's hard now because work and life is integrated geographically for many, many people. You know, you've got your children, if you have children, doing their schoolwork and homework, and then we're literally stepping from our Zoom meeting down to make dinner, you know, or walk across the hall to make dinner. So what people are missing is that transition, you know, from work to life, other activities of life. So it's very, very stressful in that way. And I know myself, I have a family of 5 people. 3 of them are young adults now, but that means cooking 7 times a week dinners. I try to get away with a few takeout dinners to support the economy and to support my sanity. But it is very, very hard and stressful. And I'll talk about that more when we talk about managers and the role that we can play in understanding some of those concepts.
Absolutely. So I'll just mention a couple of things here that I think are really important too. But while I'm doing that, if anyone has some other things that they want to just put in the chat again, we'll talk about that and mention those as well, because there's a lot of other things, of course, that you can do to maintain your mental health. One thing I want to call out here is the last one, and that's to seek care or treatment if you believe you're experiencing, you know, a little more than normal stress or anxiety or depression, because seeking help is not a big deal. You can do some look into self-help materials or just speak to your doctor, or, you know, just start, just take a step, because it's like that other saying, it's like, if you ignore it, it's going to go away. Well, it's not. We all know that. If you ignore it, it will likely get worse. So please seek care at any time you feel you need it. Neil, is there anything else in the chat?
He's muted.
Yes.
Sorry, I keep forgetting I'm muted. No, some people have asked about availability of the slides, and yes, we will make these slides available to you.
For sure.
Great. Okay.
Julie has created this flow chart and I think is really good. And I urge you guys to think about what is working for you. What helps you dial it back between that excessive stress and possible burnout when it's sustained to an optimum moderate level. You know, some days are going to be harder than others, but then that's where you think, what can I do to dial it back down to this more optimum zone? And I'll give you one anecdote. My form of exercise, my passion of exercise is dance and ballet in particular. And I used to do ballet 2 to 3 times a week. No matter how busy I was, I would fit it in unless I had a conflict. And that was my de-stressor. I enjoyed it, and it cleared my head so that I could start fresh and dial it back, as I say. And during COVID, we decided we wouldn't have it, and we didn't even want to take the virtual option. Well, fast forward to October, and we say, well, this is not going to work. This has gone on way too long. And my class decided we would start virtual. And that virtual happened a couple of weeks ago. And I suddenly realized everything that I missed about it. The muscle memory came back, the brain cells, but the physiological and the emotional impact that exercise did for me. I found not only that I felt a release of stress, but I felt invigorated, and I found my productivity and my creativity was kicked up a notch. Like right after a 9 o'clock class in the evening, I was writing stuff. But it came so quickly and so easily, and it lasted for 24 hours. So I urge you guys to think about, what do I do? What did I do? How do I modify what I do to keep myself in that zone of optimum for me? And if you do need to seek help, definitely, Julie, as Julie says, seek that help. Any other comments, Julie? Should we switch on to the next slide?
Let's move on. I think this is great. Thank you.
There was a couple of comments just to
Sure, share
bring
those.
your attention.
Okay.
People had suggestions of yoga, any sports really, talking or journaling, which are really good examples. And there was a very nice compliment of that slide that was just presented on how useful that is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I think, yeah, your comments were great, Hilda, around, you know, the creativity piece always gets me too. Like, we want to be productive, but we want to be creative too. And we can't really be creative if you're all, you know, uptight and stressed and not feeling well. You can't really be creative. So that really resonates. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on. So now, yeah, what can managers do and employers do to foster mental health in the workplace? And so we have a similar looking slide, but some different things. So, and Hilda, just jump in anytime you want here. I know you talk about all these things all the time. So fostering a positive workplace culture. And that's, you know, so what does that mean? Well, it's looking at the world, and this gets into the resiliency aspects that I know we all talk about sometimes. And that's looking at the world with the glass half full, not half empty, and focusing on positive things and spreading it to other people, you know, including your team or your coworkers or whomever it is. Just really fostering and focusing on positivity. And what we want to do is really embed it. I'm always talking to employers about this. You want to embed mental health in your workplace the same way you have probably already embedded physical health and safety into your workplace. And you know, there's a lot that goes into that, but it's just working on it day by day.
Yeah, and I'm finding that more and more organizations, particularly the larger organizations, recognize that they need to budget into their workplace that ability to foster healthy work cultures and mental health being a key component of that. And budget doesn't mean necessarily big dollars. You know, there are many ways that you can budget on a shoestring. When my husband and I had our engineering company prior to People Bright, I looked for shoestring stuff, you know, anything under $100 that I could afford for bring in somebody or whatever. You can make a difference just by finding things that using your resourcefulness and doing it on a shoestring, you can make it happen.
Absolutely. That's one thing that brings to mind is a walking group. And sometimes, and a group can only be, you know, it can be as few as 2 people, but people can go out, and even if they're not physically together because of the pandemic, they can go out for a nice walk. Say we're going to go Tuesday at 10, you know, and they can take their phone and take pictures of things they're seeing, and, you know, or and compare notes along the way. So that's something that's actually really free. And a lot of organizations do things like walking programs, or they had done pre-pandemic, but you can also do it now. Just have a virtual one, but you actually do go for a walk. So we've got some of these things in here, like, you know, we talked about, you know, for the employee to eat healthy and have the exercise and do all those wonderful things. And so, of course, we, as employers, we can foster that and encourage people to do all those things and offer certain things, as Hilda said, even on a shoestring if need be.
Well, some companies have even said, okay, you know, everybody's suffering Zoom fatigue. We have to have some time alone. So they've actually declared that for some organizations, yes, 12 to 1, no meetings. You do whatever you want, catch up on things, eat, you know, relax, go for a walk, but 12 to 1, there will be no meetings. And those are simple things. And when I did my ballet, going back to that, I've forgotten the sense of camaraderie that doing it with people together can happen, can make a difference. So think of those things in your own organizations that you could do together. I sometimes will, you know, we're on so many Zoom meetings that sometimes you have a colleague or even a client who is comfortable and say, let's do this as a walking conversation. So you both get dressed to go outside and you both start the meeting and you talk while you're walking. You know, hopefully somebody is taking notes or has a good memory of what needs to transpire, but maybe summary of the meeting is a good way to say, okay, what are the action steps here, and let's make sure one of us jots this down before we move on to the next part of the day.
Absolutely, love that. So someone said a few minutes ago, you know, when we were talking about an unhealthy workplace around harassment, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the most important things, or one of the important things here, is if something like that is going on, address it right away and take action. You know, don't let it carry on. So
yeah. And I think two different people commented on, and I think this is one of the big concerns right now. We have legislated that we have to have policies for harassment and bullying in the workplace, but a lot of organizations do not put it into action. So the culture is not, we have the policy, but we're not allowed to talk about it, and we're not allowed to open it up. So as business owners and as managers, you can create the culture where this is not tolerated, not just on paper, but in true reality, not tolerated, and create and foster a work culture where it's okay to talk about these things. And it's so important, and I'm glad a couple of people mentioned that, and definitely it's here on Julie's amazing flow chart a concept that really makes you think about some of the things that you should be doing to help stress, because it is everybody's right to come to work and be safe, and being harassed and having a toxic workplace is not feeling safe.
exactly, mentally safe as well as physically safe.
Correct.
Absolutely. So we have offer benefits on here as well, and that's actually Aviva's expertise. So she's going to be talking about that next week. So it's up here front and center as well. Should we move on?
Sure.
From this, we could talk about this all day, but we'll move on.
So I'm going to talk now about how you as a manager or company can help. And I want to zero on a few tips and strategies for you to take away today. this is a concept that I created couple of years back. It's called REVUP. And I want to share with you the Connect with REVUP approach, how to manage in COVID times. This actually comes out of the work that my husband and I did in our engineering company. We grew that engineering company from 2 people to 125 people, 20% growth year over year. And we wanted to create a special place where people felt they were doing meaningful and challenging work that made them feel good. And we wanted the work environment to really feel good. And we were successful in that vision we had to create a company where staff and the management really felt that we had achieved that. And as we sold the company and I moved on and now decided that I really love the people part of the business, and that's why I do human resources consulting, I wanted to articulate what was the recipe for success of iTrans. And I came up with this acronym, this word, which is an acronym. So connect with REVUP. Rev up your potential, rev up your company. So it is an acronym for 5 principles that will help you rev up your company. And I think during COVID times, it's important for us to really connect with our employees, to create a culture that is safe and nurturing. So it stands for respect, to treat people as they would want to be treated, not as you think they should be treated, but what they want, because we all come from different backgrounds and cultures and gendered identity, that we need to think about what is respectful in creating a relationship with that person. Treat everybody as equals, to listen to what they have to say and to value who they are as individuals. So that's the first 3 principles of REVUP. Treat people with respect and equality and value them. Recognize who they are and what they do. The next 2, I think, is where you really do uplift your organization. And that is looking at uniqueness. Each one of us, because of our various backgrounds and makeup, are unique. And what you do is you look at the person's uniqueness and you really think, how can I tap into that potential that will uplift them and make them feel valued and wanted, which increases productivity, increases loyalty and engagement. And you tap into that potential. So maximize their strengths. And that's what we did at iTrans. We used to talk to our staff. We had a mentoring program, and we would ask them, what do you want in your professional life? What do you want to be? What kind of role do you want to play? And work towards those goals. So we looked at what their uniqueness is, and we nurtured that uniqueness, their gifts, and promoted them and challenged them so that they would have that. So in COVID-19, what it's taught us is really to be adaptable and tolerant. And if you adopt approach like REVUP, you really can make a difference to yourself and to those that you support. I want to also talk about this mental wellness perspective from you as the manager or the business owner or the entrepreneur, because this can also help with your clients and your associates. So to me, trust is the key. And that's what we did when we were iTrans, and part of my REVUP formula is really create a trusting relationship with people, because when they trust you, they feel safer. And you can develop that. An anecdote I had was we had to during the 2008 recession, we had to think about closing one of our offices, and my husband and I actually went to the office and we shared the news well in advance. We weren't sure. And I remember afterwards doing it as a general meeting and then individually with everybody. And one of the staff had twins at home. They were 10 months. And I said to him, Ian, what do you want to do? How do you want me to communicate when we might have to close the office, if we do have to close the office? And what he said to me is, Hilda, I trust you. You know me well enough. I trust you to tell me when the right time is. And that meant a lot to me, but that meant that we had created a relationship where we could talk about things that were awkward at times, but that we trusted each other to do what was expected. The second point I want to share with you is recognizing social isolation and individual coping. because, and that it gets to the idea of know your people. Learn to talk, to know enough about them to put yourself a little bit in their shoes, so when you're asking them something, you can support them, you can guide them, or you can understand what's happening. So that is recognizing individuals. The person who's single and lives in a condo with no balcony access is going to really feel certain kinds of stresses. A person who's going home to three school, or not going home, who lives with three school-age children is going to, and a husband, and competing for space to have those Zoom meetings, is going to have a different set of situations. So that's what I mean by recognizing social isolation and individuals coping. You have to know a little bit about what's going on in their life. I talked about the word uplift. As leaders and business owners, you have the power to uplift your staff. Think of your development of your staff as two ladders. There's the skill ladder where you want to develop their expertise, their knowledge, their ability to do the work. But then there's the confidence ladder. And you should be matching that. Give them confidence, give them confidence, bolster skills, give them more, support them in confidence. You have the power to erode that confidence. With a word, you can demoralize them. You say, what the did you do? That is, that's crap. You just handed me crap. What damage do you think that's done? That's not a moment of 10 minutes. That could be 2 weeks. That could be 6 months later. They're going to still feel like they give you crappy stuff. So choose your words, think wisely, even when you're stressed, because you're supposed to be the gods in all this. You're supposed to manage it. Think of how you can say words that will uplift people. The last point I want to make is the Zoom fatigue. In these COVID times, it is so, we are so tied up, particularly if you're working remotely, to all these Zoom meetings. And you can go in and you can look at webinars. So we're all Zoom fatigued. And if I can dial it back to pre-COVID times, you go into a meeting or a networking session, there's something that's there that's not in a Zoom meeting. And that's the energy that you can feel. You can still feel it on Zoom, but it's not the same. And you're not used to exercising Zoom meeting energy levels, right? You're used to going into a meeting or a networking group and you can feel the energy and you can respond to it. But in COVID times, we're learning how to find what that energy is in a screenshot like what we're having right now. And so it's tiring. It's like starting a new job. You're learning. And so that's where that fatigue is coming from. So I encourage you, if you have a remote working environment, to look at ways to decrease that Zoom fatigue, suggestions that both Julie and I made earlier. And the last tip I want to give you as managers and business owners is how to manage difficult conversations. I had a webinar yesterday for an accounting group, and I did a poll and I asked them to comment on difficult conversations. And some of the comments, like 87%, 75%, people are saying, I lose sleep over a difficult conversation. I will procrastinate for 2 weeks at a time to avoid the conversation. I pretend it doesn't exist. And these are common comments. And I think the thing is that the more you start to work with a difficult conversation, the easier it will become to do it. So offering you some tips and strategies on how to deal with these difficult conversations so that they become more comfortable and even gain confidence in doing difficult conversations. So let's use an example of the situation where the person is there was an earlier situation. I just lost my train of thought here. Okay, well, let's do the harassment one. No, it's the one where people are burnt out, and you suspect they're burnt out, but you don't want to come out right and say it. So always, whenever you have a conversation, what are the facts? So when you start the conversation, start from a place of neutrality, not opinion, not assessment of what you think the situation is, just state the facts. So you might say to the person, Sally, I noticed in the last 2 to 3 weeks that you're showing up at the meetings a little bit late. Some of the work assignments you have, missed the deadlines on. This is not like you. Let's talk about it. So we stated facts, we kept it neutral, and then listen, and just continue to listen. And when you think, oh my God, I've had it, I know the answer, I'm going to tell them right now. No, and listen some more, because sometimes people just need to talk, and talking relieves some of it, gives you information, and helps you make a decision. Do not formulate your decision in 30 seconds. Listen, listen, listen. So that's the second step. And it kind of calms your nerves too, buys you time. Then say, thank you for sharing that with me. I understand a bit better now. And it sounds like this. Am I hearing you right? So never say what you think. Just say, it sounds like this is what I'm hearing. Or, so you want to get that feedback loop going, and then say, okay, I hear what you're saying, and it sounds like we need to work on this together. So they may say, yeah, I feel so stressed out, da, 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 da. And just say, yeah, I hear that. And thank you for sharing that stress. That was really, really helpful. So how do we work towards helping you gain some, level of calmness back? So that's where you work towards the solution. Now, don't be afraid to say you don't know the answer or you need time, because as a manager, there are other things that are pressing on the decision that you make. You need to think of the budget. You need to maybe it's a client that's affected, so you need to check in with the client. Or you maybe have to think about what is the legislative information that I need to follow up, which is Neil's forte. What is the legal or the regulations that I have to follow up for? Because if I say they can do this and I find out it contravenes the legislation, again, I have to renege. You don't want to renege. So don't be afraid to say, I need to check up on a few things and I'll get back to you, and then make sure you follow up. So when you have these kinds of conversations, these really help towards strengthening these respectful relationships. And that's how I had that example of that young man with his twin children, and I'm telling him we may have to close the office. So build trust really starts with conversations and supporting and helping each other. So those were my tips and strategies for you with regards to some of the things you can do as business owners and as managers of your organizations. And we wanted to share some tips and strategies. I see some more things on the chat box. Neil, do you want to come forward and comment on that before Julie starts to talk of some of the resources that we've put together for the slides?
And just a little time check, it's 10 to 2. So I encourage people to keep popping questions and comments in so that we can get to them all before our time is up, and we really want to be respectful of your time. Somebody was commenting on how Zoom is so draining with respect to having to pay attention to body language. And, this person has come up with a strategy that sometimes they just turn their camera off so that they're not paying attention to that. So there's certainly a lot of realities of what we're speaking about that is going on with a number of our participants today. So.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing your comments on the chat line, because it helps resonate with all of us, what we're all going through, and tips and strategies to help each of us.
Absolutely. And just to follow on that, sometimes I offer a Zoom meeting to people, and then sometimes I say, would you rather just have an old-fashioned phone call? And I'm having people take me up. I even call it that, an old-fashioned phone call. And people are taking me up on that, where it makes sense. So, okay, let's take a look at some tools, apps, and resources. And so in this first slide, I really like this. It's what Ontario came out with initially to deal with COVID-19. And it's one of the things I like about it is that it has resources for different folks, like the Good to Talk, the one at the end. It's phone and texting service for post-secondary students. They're suffering a lot. They've got an awful lot of stress that they're dealing with. So there's that. For younger kids, there's the Kids Help phone. And then for the other ones, there's just for anyone, or maybe more geared towards adults that are looking for some assistance around their mental health. So these are some really good resources that the province of Ontario has come out with. We'll take a look at the next one. So these are some of the ones that I've put together that I like. Check Up from the Neck Up is created by Mood Disorders, as you see there, and it's free of charge. And I like it because you go in and you answer questions. It's to check how you're doing, of course. It's that self check-in. And depending on how you answer the questions, it's, it's not a static thing. The menu changes. And so it'll ask you, different questions depending on how you answer. And at the end, you get a report that you can, just have for yourself, for your own well-being check-in, or you can take it to your doctor or send it to your doctor online, different things like that. And you can use it time and time again. So I like that one. Most of us know these days that breathing is one of the main things we can do to calm ourselves down and feel, less stressed and that kind of thing. Breathe to Relax is a smartphone app that does just that. And it's kind of cool. It goes, as you breathe, it changes. Happify is, there's a lot of research around different things that they've come up with to train the brain to be happier and to combat, as it says there, the negativity and anxiety, that kind of thing. That one is a little more pricey. I have Calm and Headspace, and I wonder if anyone out there also has some of these. I use these for mindfulness, meditation, and also sleeping. The Calm app is amazing. It has all these sleep stories, and they've got Matthew McConaughey, and they've got all sorts of people on there telling all sorts of stories. That makes you fall asleep. And I'll say to my husband, I used it last night and it was great. And he'd say, what's the story about? And I'd say, I don't know. I put it on, it sounded interesting, and then I woke up. So it really does work. Another one that isn't there, if you want to make a note of it, is called Slumber. And Slumber is very similar to that. It's to help you sleep, obviously, with that name. And it's really good too. If anyone has some other good ones, you can stick it in the chat and we can mention them also. The next one is Pay It Forward. There's two there, like you click on them and then they'll take you to different apps. And this is on the premise of, the daily act of kindness, and that makes you feel good and it helps you with your mental health and that sort of thing. So this is on this principle that those two are there. The next three are just a wealth of information from these organizations. The first one is CAMH, Center for Addiction and Mental Health. They have some really good information on there, not just statistics and things like that, although there's some really interesting ones, but also things that you can do for your own mental health, resources and things like that. There's the Mental Health Commission of Canada, same thing, some really good information there, and the Canadian Mental Health Association. And they all have a little bit different information. Some of it's overlaps, but they all have amazing resources and information. And sometimes it's good just to read about it. They'll read about, or they'll talk about what stress is. And it's good to just read it sometimes, like, okay, yeah, I understand what this is and how I'm feeling in relation to that. So these are some tools, apps, and resources for you. And so now we will get into the Q&A, and maybe there's some things there on the chat, Neil. You're on mute.
So used to not being on mute. Anyways, one of the panelists made a great recommendation that Insight Timer is also a good free app. It's not one I'm familiar with,
Okay.
But they recommend it as well.
I'll look into that.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a question that popped up around that was more in the legal realm, and I would just say that we will hold that until the next session and take care of that in that session as well. But at this time, and being cognizant of everybody's time, if you've got comments or any questions, we're happy to entertain them just before we wrap up. So I would really encourage you. We've had some great input and insight. You've been a great audience. So if there's anything else, please let us know. And sorry, somebody else just put something in there. So Graham has just popped in. If you haven't registered for next week's session, he's posted the link to that. Next week, some of the you see our agenda for next week, a summary of what we've done this week. I will talk about overview of compliance obligations. And I just want to stress, and this is something I should have mentioned at the beginning, all of us, our sweet spot, our niche, the people we work with are small to medium-sized businesses, startups, just like yourselves. So we have been able to assist, support, and provide services for folks like yourself that may be getting, quite honestly, a little overwhelmed with this. But even if you have 1 employee to 100 to 1,000, this all matters. From keeping those people psychologically safe, psychologically sound, to meeting your obligations. If you have just 1 employee, there are obligations that you have for compliance. And I know Aviva has done quite a bit of work in providing benefits for small and medium-sized organizations. That's another question I know that some of you might be wondering, but we are able to provide these. We know you don't have the resources of an IBM, but we're able to still service you with cost-effective programs. And that's also part of the other reason that we created this Rockstars Resiliency Program. So I don't see any other questions in the chat right now, so we can
okay, we'll go on to the next slide. Yeah, we wanted to say thank you so much.
Yes.
And to everyone, and it's been great to be here. We really enjoyed it.